When you think of Norway, what comes to mind? Probably free healthcare, gorgeous streets just packed with electric cars, and a government that's sitting on an almost unimaginable fortune. On the surface, it really does look like the perfect country, an economic utopia. But what if that utopia is actually a gilded cage?
Okay, just look at this number. That's $1.6 trillion. That is the insane size of Norway's national wealth fund. It's a national piggy bank so huge that it owns over 1.5% of every single publicly traded company on planet Earth. But what if I told you that this incredible treasure is also a trap?
Because that, right there, is the huge paradox we're going to dig into. The official story, the one everyone knows, is about this perfect economic success. But the uncomfortable truth is that this mind-boggling wealth might be quietly poisoning the country's future, creating what some people are calling the lazy nation trap.
So let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself. If the government guaranteed your entire salary for a whole year, even if you just stopped working, would you still go to your job every day? Your answer to that question is the key to understanding this whole story.
To really get how this trap was even set, we've got to rewind the clock. We need to go back to a time when Norway wasn't rich at all. In fact, it was kind of the poor cousin of Scandinavia.
Back in the 1950s, Norway was a nation of fishermen, just scraping by. Their own geologists, in 1958, literally declared there was zero chance of finding oil there. But then, on Christmas Eve of 1969, an American company, on its very last-ditch effort, hit something massive. And just like that, overnight, Norway had won the geological lottery.
Now, usually when a country strikes oil, they fall into something called the resource curse, or Dutch disease. Basically, a flood of money comes in, messes up their economy, and kills every other industry. But Norway? Norway did something incredibly smart.
First, they hit the oil companies with a brutal 78% tax. Then, they took all that money, and instead of going on a massive spending spree, they locked it away in this special fund. They invested it all over the world to keep it from wrecking their own economy, and, here's the key, they made a strict rule to only spend about 3% of the fund's earnings each year. They basically hid the money from themselves.
Look, on paper, on a spreadsheet, this is an absolute masterclass in how to run a country's finances. It's disciplined, it's smart, it's responsible. But in the real world, when you have a safety net woven from solid gold, the fear of falling just vanishes. And what happens then? Well, often the drive to hustle vanishes right along with it.
So this curse, it's not just some vague idea. It shows up in 3 really specific and, frankly, kind of alarming symptoms that are slowly changing the culture of the country. All right, symptom number 1, the sickness epidemic. This chart shows something pretty startling. Norway has one of the highest rates of people calling in sick in the entire world. Now you might be thinking, well, yeah, it's cold up there. But look at Sweden and Finland. Same brutal winters, but their rates are way, way lower. So what gives?
The difference? It all comes down to this one single number, 100%. In Norway, if you call in sick, you get 100% of your salary from the very first day, for up to a whole year. There is zero financial downside to not going to work.
This system is so generous, it has literally created a new word in their language. The welfare agency is called nav. And now, young people use it as a verb. To nav. It means to just kick back and live on government benefits for a while instead of working or going to school. I mean, that tells you everything about the cultural shift, right?
And that attitude, that lack of urgency, it leads us straight into the second major symptom, a massive innovation vacuum. Because that oil money, it completely distorts the job market.
I mean, why would any brilliant young engineer risk everything on a crazy startup idea when you can get a huge, safe, comfortable salary working in the oil industry right after you graduate? And this slide just shows the brutal result. Sweden gave the world Spotify, Skype, IKEA. Norway gave us oil and a web browser a while back. The oil industry acts like this giant black hole. It just sucks the best and the brightest people out of every other potential industry. That absolute financial security has, in a way, killed the hunger and the risk-taking you need for real innovation.
And that brings us to the third, and maybe the most fascinating symptom of all, a giant moral paradox that sits right at the heart of Norway's national identity.
So Norway has worked incredibly hard
to project this image of being the world's green leader, right? The streets of Oslo have more electric cars per person than anywhere else on Earth. They present themselves as the poster child for a clean, sustainable future.
But here's the reality. Here's the uncomfortable truth. That entire green utopia, all those Teslas, all those climate initiatives, it's all funded by being a massive petrostate. They pay for it all by drilling for and selling millions of barrels of oil and gas to the rest of the world.
Someone put it perfectly with this quote, and it just cuts right through the noise. They're basically selling the fossil fuels that caused the problem, then using the profits to go green at home while telling everyone else to be more sustainable. It's a really deep contradiction.
So where does all this lead? Is Norway at risk of becoming a nation of trust fund kids? The biggest threat they're facing isn't what you might think it is.
You know, there's this old saying about the cycle of history. It goes like this. And right now, Norway is living deep inside step 3. Good times create weak men. They've managed their money with genius-level skill, but they might be failing to manage their culture.
And this is the most important takeaway. The biggest danger for Norway isn't the oil running out or the stock market crashing. It's the very real danger that when the good times finally slow down, they'll be left with a generation that has completely forgotten what it means to struggle, to take risks, and to hustle.
It's a powerful lesson, not just for a country, but for any person or any company. Incredible wealth without any struggle can lead to stagnation. And it leaves us all with one final, kind of haunting question to think about. What really happens to a society when the hustle is forgotten?